the family reunion that changed everything forever. Before we begin the story, make sure to subscribe to our channel and never miss more incredible stories every day. My grandma didn't look confused. She looked hunted as she said, "I never signed that." The dining room at the lake house went silent except for the ceiling fan ticking like a metronome. Outside, the water slapped the dock in slow, bored waves, like the whole world had other plans. Aunt Diane's smile froze mid-hostess, mid-performance. My cousin Miles stopped chewing like the food had turned to sand. And I just sat there, 32 years old, hands still smelling faintly like brake cleaner from the city bus garage, staring at a paper that had somehow turned my family reunion into a courtroom. I came because Grandma Ruth asked. Her voice on the phone had been small and stubborn. "Andrew, I want everyone here. Before winter." I told myself it was about healing. That was the word Diane kept using in her group texts, healing in all caps, with heart emojis like a threat. What I risked by staying was simple, my sanity, and the last thin thread connecting me to my dad's side of the family. I'd been the scapegoat since I was a kid, the one who made things difficult, the one who asked questions at the wrong time. Diane was the fixer, the peacemaker, the woman who could make any story sound polite if you let her. Miles had always been the golden child adjacent. Funny, easy, the one people forgave. Diane slid a crisp packet from her floral binder across the table toward Grandma, like it was a menu. "Ruth, we just need you to confirm what you already agreed to," she said, voice sweet enough to rot teeth. "So we can keep the property in the family." Grandma's fingers trembled as she traced the signature line. Then her eyes snapped up, sharp, furious. "That's not my hand," she whispered. Miles tried to laugh it off. "Come on, Grandma. You sign stuff all the time. Maybe it's not," she cut in, and the fear in her voice made my stomach drop. Her gaze flicked past Diane, straight to me, like she'd been waiting for one person to finally see it. On the bottom corner was a file name, printed like a footer, Ruth_estate plan_updated_03-14-2019, PDF. And then Aunt Diane reached for Grandma's wrist like she owned it. 3 weeks earlier, I almost didn't go. In our family, reunions weren't gatherings, they were rewrites. Aunt Diane ran them like she ran everything after Grandpa died, with color-coded schedules, forced group photos, and a rule nobody said out loud. Don't bring up the thing we didn't talk about. There was always a golden child, always a peacemaker, always a scapegoat to blame when the vibes got weird. I was the scapegoat because I remembered details. The official story was simple. Grandma Ruth was getting forgetful. The lake house, our crooked place outside Madison where the dock boards pinched your feet, was too much for her. Diane, being the responsible one, had stepped in to help. Miles joked about it at Thanksgiving years ago. Aunt D is basically the CEO of Ruth Incorporated. Everyone laughed, because it was safer than noticing how true it was. My version of the story had jagged edges. My dad, Diane's older brother, died in 2014, and his funeral turned into a networking event for relatives I barely knew. Diane hugged me like a politician, then pulled me aside and said, "Your father left a mess. Let the adults handle it." I was 21 and still believed adults were a real category. After that, every time I asked about Dad's life insurance or the small college account he'd promised me, Diane gave me the same smile. "Andrew, honey, don't fixate on money. It's unbecoming." Then she'd change the subject like flipping a light switch. The last time I saw most of them was Christmas 2019. I'd mentioned that Grandma looked thinner, that she was mixing up names. Diane put a hand on my shoulder, gentle, possessive, and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "Andrew always exaggerates. He likes drama." Miles cracked a joke to smooth it over. The peacemakers nodded, and I drove home feeling like I'd been erased again. So when Grandma called now, I hesitated. I could already hear the script. Forgiveness, family, the past is the past. Still, her voice had sounded pinned down, like someone was in the room with her. Diane texted me the address and a heart. Then, separately, "Please don't upset Ruth with accusations this weekend." I stared at that message a long time, because it didn't sound like concern. It sounded like a warning she'd used before. The lake house looked the same from the driveway. 2 stories of gray wood and peeling paint, stubbornly holding onto the shoreline like it had something to prove. But the moment I stepped inside, I could feel the difference. It wasn't nostalgia in the air. It was surveillance. Diane had arranged name cards at the long dining table like a wedding planner. Grandma sat at the head like a prop, a knitted shawl around her shoulders even though the house was warm. Miles waved me in from the far end, his grin a little too bright. "Andy, you made it," he said, pulling me into a hug that felt like an apology he didn't explain. "Don't let Aunt Dee bite you." Diane glided over before I could answer. She kissed my cheek, perfume heavy, smile camera ready. "Andrew," she said, using my full name like a correction. "So glad you came. Ruth has been emotional." Grandma reached for my hand and squeezed too hard. "You look tired," she murmured. Her nails were short, bitten. That wasn't like her. I glanced around. The family photos on the mantel had been rearranged. New frames, new order. A big portrait of Diane and Miles was centered where Grandpa's wedding picture used to be. The little memorial shelf for my dad, his fishing hat, his goofy Polaroid, was gone entirely. And the guest list felt wrong. Fewer cousins than I remembered, fewer chaotic kids. Like someone had trimmed the tree. In the kitchen, I noticed a locked drawer under the counter, the keyhole shiny from recent use. On the fridge, a printed itinerary was taped up. Saturday, 6 p.m., family dinner, no drama. A small black camera sat on top of the microwave, aimed at the doorway, its blue light blinking. No drama, I repeated under my breath. Miles followed my eyes. "She's just trying to keep things smooth," he said quickly, like he'd practiced the line. Then I saw it. Grandma's pill organizer sitting on the highest shelf, out of her reach. Diane caught me looking and laughed. "Oh, I moved that so she wouldn't overdo it," she said. "You know how she gets." Grandma's fingers tightened around mine like she was trying not to shake. That was my first real red flag, and I ignored it for exactly 10 minutes. 10 minutes later, I went looking for the bathroom and found the hallway Diane didn't want guests using. The door at the end used to be Grandpa's study. Now it had a new brass keypad lock, the kind people install when they're tired of pretending. I slowed down, trying to act casual, but the floorboards betrayed me with a long, complaining creak. From inside, I heard Diane's voice, low, sharp. "No, you don't understand," she said. "If he starts asking about 2019, we're done." A man answered through the speakerphone, too muffled to catch words. Diane's tone changed, sweetening. "Yes, I have the updated estate plan. The PDF is clean. The only risk is Ruth gets dramatic." My stomach flipped. I backed away, heart thudding, and almost collided with Miles coming from the kitchen with 2 beers. "What are you doing over here?" he asked, too fast. "Bathroom," I lied. Miles's eyes flicked to the keypad lock, then back to me. "That room's off limits. It's just paperwork." "Paperwork needs a keypad?" I tried to joke. He forced a laugh. "Aunt Dee is weird about privacy." We walked back toward the kitchen, but my brain stayed in that hallway. 2019, updated estate plan. Ruth gets dramatic. What would you do if you overheard your family talking about your grandmother like a liability? Later, while everyone was outside taking staged arrival photos on the dock, I slipped inside and checked the trash. I wasn't proud of it, but I was also done being polite. Under paper plates and napkins, I found the corner of a manila folder, ripped in half. On the tab, in black marker, it said, "Ruth, P.O./deed." A staple still clung to the edge, like someone had torn it out in a hurry. Beneath it were thin, shredded strips of paper, some still readable. "Quit claim deed, Dane County," and a date fragment, 04/0_/2019. I told myself it could be innocent. Power of attorney paperwork happens. Deeds get updated. Then I noticed the shredder smell, hot plastic and dust, hanging in the air like smoke. Dinner that night was classic Keaton theater. Diane made family favorites and narrated every dish like a cooking show. Miles kept the jokes rolling, serving as the designated peacemaker even when nobody asked him to. Grandma Ruth sat quiet, pushing food around her plate, and every few minutes Diane would touch her shoulder and say, "You're doing great, Mom," like she was training a dog. At one point, I mentioned my job in passing, how a bus had come in with a brake line leak, how a kid would have gotten hurt if we'd missed it. It wasn't heroic. It was just work. Diane clinked her glass. "Andrew fixes buses," she announced to the table, smiling wide. "Isn't that adorable? Like community service." Heat crawled up my neck. "It's maintenance," I said. "It keeps people alive." Miles chuckled, trying to soften it. Hey, buses are basically giant metal toddlers. Diane ignored him. I'm only teasing, she said, the same way she used to when I was 12 and cried. But it's important to have realistic expectations, right? Some people are leaders. Some people are. She glanced at my grease-stained knuckles. Helpers. I felt the old familiar shrink in my chest, the childhood feeling of being talked about like furniture. Why are you doing this? I asked, quieter than I meant. Her eyes flashed, then smoothed over. Because this weekend is about peace, she said. And peace requires everyone staying in their lane. Grandma's fork clattered against her plate. Diane, she said suddenly, voice sharp enough to cut. Everyone froze, shocked she'd interrupted. Don't speak to him like that. Diane laughed too quickly. Mom, you're tired. Let's not. No, Grandma insisted, and her gaze locked on Diane with something that looked like recognition. You've been telling the story wrong for years. The room went cold. Miles's smile disappeared. Diane leaned in, still smiling, but her words came out in a hiss only I could hear. Don't start, Andrew. Not here. Then Grandma reached under the table and pressed something into my palm, a small brass key, warm from her hand. Basement, she whispered, eyes wide with fear, before she finds it again. The basement door stuck like it always had, swelling in humid summers. I waited until Diane started her after-dinner family game night, upstairs, loud enough that no one would hear me descend, and then I slipped down with Grandma's brass key clenched in my fist. The basement smelled like damp wood and old sunscreen. The single bulb flickered, throwing shadows across stacked totes labeled in Diane's tidy handwriting. Linens, Zmaz, Ruth, important. That last one made my throat tighten. The key fit a small padlock on the important tote. Inside were photo albums, loose documents, and a dusty VHS case with masking tape on it. The tape was handwritten, shaky. Ruth and Grandpa, summer 2009/Don't Lose. A keepsake. The kind families keep because it proves the past existed. I shoved the VHS into my jacket and flipped through the top album. Someone had removed photos, torn edges, empty corners. I found one remaining picture of my dad on the dock, arm around Grandma. In the background, barely visible, was a man I didn't recognize standing with them, smiling like he belonged. Upstairs, a floorboard creaked. Then another. A slow, deliberate rhythm, not the random shuffle of relatives. Andrew, Miles called from the stairwell, voice light but strained. Dude, where'd you go? My pulse kicked. I snapped the tote shut and slid it back. Bathroom, I said again, because lying was the only skill this family had ever taught me. Miles came down 2 steps, stopping where the light hit his face. His eyes landed on my jacket, on the squared outline of the VHS case. What did Grandma give you? He asked softly. What do you mean? I tried. He swallowed. She shouldn't have pulled you into this. Into what exactly? Miles exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for years. If you found anything, he said, you need to put it back. Aunt Dee will burn the whole house down to keep control. And then his gaze flicked past me, to the padlock hanging open in plain sight. The next morning, I escaped to the only place in town that didn't feel like Diane's stage. A greasy diner off Highway 19 called Lulu's, wedged between a bait shop and a gas station. The waitress called everyone Han, and didn't care who my aunt thought she was. I ordered black coffee I didn't want and opened my phone like it was a weapon. The lake house Wi-Fi kept dropping, which felt less like bad service and more like a choice. At Lulu's, the signal was steady. I searched Dane County Register of Deeds and typed in Grandma Ruth Keaton's name. My hands shook so hard I mistyped it twice. The result popped up like a slap. A quitclaim deed recorded on April 2nd, 2019. Grantor, Ruth M. Keaton. Grantee, Diane Keaton. Trustee, Diane Keaton. Revocable trust. Consideration, $1. $1. For the place my dad taught me to fish. For the house where Grandma kept his ashes on the mantle. I clicked View Image. The PDF loaded, grainy but readable, labeled Instrument 547-8213 in the corner. I took screenshots, 3 of them, because I'd learned the hard way that words disappear in my family. My camera roll filled with receipts. IMG_1047. PNG, IMG_1048. PNG, and a close-up of the signature, IMG_1049. PNG. At the bottom was a notary stamp, Kara S. Whitmore, Notary Public, State of Wisconsin. Location, Milwaukee. Milwaukee. I froze, because I knew where Grandma was on April 2nd, 2019. I'd taken a day off work to drive her to UW Hospital in Madison for her heart appointment. I still had the parking receipt in my glove box like some dumb, sentimental hoarder. UW Health Garage, April 2nd, 2019, $12.00. So how did she sign a deed in Milwaukee that same day? A text buzzed. Miles. Miles, where are you? Me, getting coffee. Miles, don't do anything stupid. Me, define stupid. He didn't answer. I stared at the deed again, zoomed in on the signature. It looked like Grandma's name, but the slant was wrong, the pressure too even, like someone had traced it slowly. What would you do if your family's help came with a forged pen stroke? Then I noticed the deed's witness line, one name I recognized from Diane's holiday cards. I waited until after lunch to watch the VHS, because I needed my hands steady. Miles distracted Diane with a dock repair project, his idea of penance, while I slipped into the living room and dug an old VCR out of a cabinet like it was contraband. The tape whirred, the screen went blue, then grainy summer light filled the TV. Grandma Ruth sat on the porch in 2009, younger and louder. Grandpa stood behind the camera, laughing, and my dad, alive, sunburned, smiling, leaned into frame and said, "Ma, promise me you won't let Diane bully you when I'm gone." The room tilted. Grandma on the tape rolled her eyes. "Diane is bossy, not evil," she said, then looked straight at the camera. "But you boys hear me. This house stays in the family equally. No one gets to steal it with paperwork." Grandpa zoomed in on a folder on the table. A will. He panned slowly, like he wanted proof. The top page read, "Last Will and Testament of Ruth M. Keaton, June 11th, 2016. Beneath it, in bold, a line I could still make out. "Equal shares to my children." Equal. Upstairs, someone laughed, Diane's laugh, and I yanked the tape out like it might burn me. I went back to the basement tote. Under the photo albums, taped to the bottom, was a slim USB drive. I plugged it into my laptop, and 3 files appeared. Ruth _will_ 2016 scanned. PDF. Ruth estate plan updated 03-14-2019. PDF. POA Ruth 2019 final. Docs. The 2019 PDF was the one from the dinner table. I opened it and felt my throat close. Page 2 transferred the lake house to Diane's trust for management purposes. Page 5 cut everyone else out. It was written in that cold, legal tone that makes stealing sound responsible. And the signature line looked practiced. I still didn't know why Diane did it. Greed, debt, fear, something worse. But I finally knew what she'd been hiding. What kind of healing weekend required a forged will and a locked study? My cursor hovered over the document like it was a bomb. If the file had been created by a lawyer, it would show. If it had been scanned, it would show. If it had been tampered with, it would show. Then I clicked File Properties, and my blood turned to ice. The file properties answered one question and created 3 more. Author, Diane Keaton. Computer, Diane Lenovo. Created, March 14th, 2019, 9:18 a.m. Last saved, March 14th, 2019, 11:02 a.m. So the updated estate plan hadn't come from some neutral attorney. It came from my aunt's laptop on a random Thursday morning, 2 weeks before that deed got recorded. I needed to know the stakes before I decided whether to blow up the weekend. I went upstairs and found Diane's floral binder again, sitting open on the kitchen counter like she assumed no one would dare touch it. Under Reunion Activities, tucked behind a recipe printout, was a real estate packet. Northlake Realty, listing proposal. Estimated sale price, $685,000. Recommended, list immediately after family weekend. My mouth went dry. I snapped photos of every page, IMG_1053 to IMG_1059, like insurance. Behind that was an email draft printed out, with the subject line circled in pink pen, Lake House Closing, February 24th, 2026. The buyer's name was there, a deposit amount, $25,000, and a line that hit me like a punch. Seller to confirm Ruth Keaton will not be present at signing. Not present. That was when it hit me. The reunion was never about healing. It was about control. Because Grandma wasn't supposed to be an obstacle. She was supposed to be furniture. I heard her soft shuffle behind me. Grandma had come into the kitchen without me noticing, like a ghost. "Are they taking it?" she asked, voice small. I looked at her face, at the bruised yellow mark on her wrist where Diane had grabbed her at dinner, and something in me snapped into clarity. This wasn't about inheritance drama in the abstract. If Diane sold the lake house, Grandma lost her only safe place. The money wouldn't go to her care. It would go wherever Diane wanted it to go, and Grandma would be told it was necessary. Miles walked in then, saw the papers in my hands, and went pale. "Andrew, don't," he whispered. "You don't know what she's trying to cover." "Cover what?" He opened his mouth, and the back door creaked open behind him. The back door opened, and Aunt Diane walked in carrying a tray of store-bought pie like she'd just finished being a normal person. Her eyes landed on the papers in my hands. They didn't widen. They didn't blink. They just sharpened. "Well," she said brightly, setting the tray down. "Look at you two. Bonding." Miles stepped in front of me. "We were just looking for the napkins," he lied, voice thin. Diane smiled at him like he was a toddler. Then she turned to me. "Andrew, can I speak with you?" It wasn't a question. She guided me into the bedroom hallway, away from Grandma, away from witnesses. The camera on the microwave blinked its blue light in my peripheral vision, like a reminder, behave. Diane's smile evaporated the second we were alone. "You went through my things," she said. "I picked up papers that were on the counter." I answered, careful. Her head tilted. "You always do this. You always make a scene because you can't stand not being important." "What's important is Ruth." I shot back, and even saying Grandma's first name felt like crossing a line. Diane's nostrils flared. "Ruth is safe because of me. Do you know how many times I've cleaned up your father's messes? Do you know what it costs to keep a family looking respectable? Selling her house costs her everything." She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Listen to me. You work for the city, right? Benefits, pension, background checks. All very delicate. It would be a shame if your supervisor heard you were harassing an elderly woman with dementia." My stomach twisted. "She doesn't have dementia." Diane's smile returned, small, cruel. "That depends on what the doctor writes, doesn't it?" Miles hovered behind her, pale, sweating. "Aunt D, please," he said. "Not like this." Diane didn't look at him. She looked at me, like she was measuring how hard she'd have to press. "This weekend was meant to heal," she whispered. "But if you insist on reopening old wounds, I can make sure you're the one who bleeds." What would you do if keeping the peace meant letting someone steal your grandmother's life? "In 10 minutes, meet me alone in the study," Diane said. I met Diane in the study because I needed to see what she thought I knew. The room smelled like lemon polish and control. File boxes lined the walls, labeled in her neat script. A scanner sat on the desk. For half a second, her jaw tightened. Then she laughed. "You looked it up." "Of course you did." She tapped the desk. "Ruth signed it." She agreed. "You weren't here." I said. "I drove her to UW Hospital that day." Diane's eyes narrowed. "You're misremembering." That was her favorite move. Tell you your memory was the problem. I nodded like she'd convinced me. "Maybe," I said. "I just want to make sure everything is legitimate." Diane's smile widened. "Good. Then stop digging. Leave the adults to handle it." I left the study with my skin buzzing, and I didn't go back upstairs. I went straight to Grandma's room. "Pack a sweater," I told her quietly. "We're going for a drive." Miles met us at the car, jittery. "Where?" he asked. "To someone who doesn't belong to Diane," I said. Attorney Patel's office sat in a low brick building near the courthouse, the kind of place that smelled like toner and old coffee. Patel didn't flinch when I slid my phone across his desk with the screenshots. Instrument 547-8213, the Milwaukee notary stamp, the listing packet. He just got very still. "Forgery and undue influence are both possibilities," he said, calm, precise. "And if Ruth didn't understand what she signed, this can become elder exploitation." Grandma whispered, "I never signed in Milwaukee." Patel nodded once. "Then we document that. Today. And we stop any sale." "What's the move?" I asked. He pulled out a form titled Affidavit of Non-Execution and clicked print. The printer warmed up, and Patel's expression shifted as he read the registry details. Sunday brunch looked normal on the surface. Pancakes, orange juice, Diane humming like she'd already won. Grandma Ruth sat small in her chair, cardigan buttoned wrong, eyes flicking toward the hallway like she expected to be escorted away. Patel arrived at 10:14 a.m. Diane didn't recognize him at first, just another friend at her table, until Miles saw him and went rigid. "Who's that?" Diane asked, too casually. "A friend of mine," I said. "He's here for Ruth." Diane's smile tightened. "Andrew, this is family." "Exactly," I said. "So we're done pretending." I plugged my laptop into the TV. On screen, Instrument 547-8213, Quit Claim Deed, recorded April 2nd, 2019. I zoomed in on the notary stamp, Kara S., Whitmore, Milwaukee. Diane laughed, sharp. "You're doing this at brunch?" Patel's voice stayed calm. "Miss Keaton, if Ruth did not execute this deed, the recording is fraudulent." I clicked forward. The photo of my glove box receipt, UW Health Garage, April 2nd, 2019, $12.00. Then the file properties. Author, Diane Keaton. Created, March 14th, 2019, 9:18 a.m. 3 pieces of evidence, plain as day. Grandma lifted her chin. "I was with Andrew that day," she said, steady. "You told me you were handling some papers." Diane's eyes flashed. "Mom, you're confused." I played the VHS clip I'd filmed. Grandma in 2009 saying, "No one gets to steal it with paperwork." My dad's voice asking her to promise. Miles stood so fast his chair screeched. "Stop," he blurted, hands shaking. Patel set the affidavit on the table. "Ruth, if this is true, you can sign that you did not execute the deed." Diane snapped. "You can't sign anything." And then her mask finally slipped. "Do you know why I did it?" she hissed at me. "Because Miles took out a private loan in 2019, $312,000, and the lender demanded collateral." Miles made a broken sound. "Aunt D, please." "I put the house in my trust so I could pledge it," Diane said, voice rising. "To save him. To save this family from scandal." She jabbed a finger at me like a verdict. "And now you're going to ruin us all for a garage job?" For a second, nobody moved. It was like the whole family needed a buffering wheel. Then Diane reached for the laptop. Not to look, to grab. To yank the HDMI cable and shut the screen off like truth was a light switch. I blocked her with my arm. The motion was instinctive, protective, and it made her snap. "You're trespassing in my home," she shouted. "It's not your home," Grandma said, and her voice wobbled but held. Diane spun on her. "Mom, stop. You're embarrassing yourself." Miles backed toward the door, face gray. "I didn't know it would get this bad," he kept saying, like repetition could become a defense. Patel stood, hands open. "Miss Keaton, I'm advising you to step back. If Ruth is saying she did not sign, and we have evidence of misrepresentation, this becomes potential elder exploitation." Diane laughed, high panicked. "You can't arrest me for helping my mother." Patel didn't argue. He simply took out his phone and said, "I'm calling the sheriff's office and Adult Protective Services." That sentence changed the air. Diane's eyes went cold. "Andrew," she said, suddenly quiet. "If you do this, you don't get to come back. Ever." I thought about all the times I'd already been pushed out, holidays, funerals, quiet family jokes that had me as the punchline. And I realized I'd been not welcome for years. I'd just never been told directly. "Okay," I said. Grandma's hand found mine under the table. It was shaking. The first deputy arrived 26 minutes later, because small towns have long drives and short patience. Diane tried to charm him the way she charmed everyone. "Officer, this is a misunderstanding." Mom gets confused. The deputy crouched to Grandma's level. "Ma'am, did you sign papers giving your house away?" Grandma swallowed, looked at the TV still paused on the deed, then nodded no. "I didn't," she said. "And she keeps taking my pills." That last part hit like a hammer. The deputy's posture shifted. Patel spoke quietly with him at the counter, showing the screenshots and the affidavit. Miles started crying in the doorway, a full-body sob that sounded like guilt breaking loose. Diane smiled once, then produced a key that didn't belong to her. The next 48 hours were a blur of forms, phone calls, and the kind of exhaustion that lives in your bones. The deputy didn't haul Diane away in handcuffs that day. Real life doesn't always give you that clean TV moment, but he did separate her from Grandma. Adult Protective Services opened a case. Patel filed an emergency petition so Grandma could appoint someone she trusted to handle decisions until things got sorted. Diane tried to object, of course. She called me 12 times and left one voicemail that was pure venom. "You're killing your mother with stress, you selfish little boy." Patel told me not to respond. "Let the record speak," he said. So we built a record. Monday morning, we drove to the county office and requested certified copies of the deed and the trust documents. The clerk stamped them with a heavy thud like it was sealing a coffin. Patel also sent a preservation letter to Northlake Realty and the lender, warning them the collateral transfer was disputed. Grandma moved into my apartment for a while. It wasn't cinematic, it was cramped and awkward. She hated my cheap couch. I hated how she apologized for taking up space. At night, she'd wake up and ask, "Did I do something wrong?" And I'd have to answer the same thing, gently, like rehabbing a bruised muscle. "No, someone used you." I went back to work at the bus garage, and it felt surreal to crawl under engines while my family collapsed above ground. My supervisor pulled me aside on Tuesday. "You okay?" he asked. I almost laughed. I told him the truth in one sentence. My aunt tried to steal my grandma's house. He stared, then said, "Clock in. We'll deal with whatever comes." Miles showed up at my place once, eyes red, hands shaking. "I'll fix it," he promised. "You can't fix it with more lies," I said. "Treatment. A job. No money from Grandma. Everything in writing." He nodded like he understood, and for the first time I saw how scared he was of his own life. That night, Patel emailed me a scanned document with one line highlighted in yellow. The highlighted line on Patel's scan was the part that made me sit down. Witness, Miles Keaton. I'd seen his name on Diane's holiday cards, sure, but seeing it on a legal document, tied to a date and a lie, was different. It meant the peacemaker had been in the room. It meant the golden child adjacent had helped hold the pen, even if he swore he didn't understand what it was doing. When I confronted him, he didn't deny it. He just looked at the floor and said, "She told me it was so Grandma wouldn't get scammed. She said you'd freak out, so I shouldn't tell you." That's how manipulation works in families like mine. Nobody thinks they're the villain. Everyone thinks they're preventing chaos. And the scapegoat, me, becomes the excuse for every secret. The legal process crawled like a tired animal. Patel filed to invalidate the deed. The lender froze the sale once they realized the collateral was contested. Adult Protective Services documented Grandma's medication issues and set up an in-home evaluation. Diane started telling relatives I was taking advantage of Ruth, because controlling people don't retire, they just change costumes. I didn't win in some triumphant way. I lost a family myth. But I gained something steadier, boundaries. Grandma kept her choices. I kept my dignity. Miles entered outpatient treatment, and my help came with conditions, not checks. And I learned that love without paperwork is still love, but paperwork without love is just theft in a nicer font. If you're reading this and your gut is screaming, here's what I wish I'd known sooner. Pull the public records yourself. Take screenshots with dates, keep receipts, and talk to an elder law attorney before you talk it out at dinner. Peace built on silence is just someone else's power.